This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Hey, it's DocNJock. Thanks everybody for tuning in this week to the latest edition of our podcast. So much to get into. What a wild time it is in the world of football. Already had a chance to check in on some college football action. Scott Frost be acting like Scott Frost. It was great to see. Stay tuned. Second half of this broadcast, we are going to break down what to expect from Michigan and Michigan State as they kick off the 2022 campaign this weekend. And we have to start the podcast, though, with all things going on with the Detroit Lions. The best time of training camp is to now look at the Detroit Lions roster. And I think Adam and I, this one time, timed it perfectly, where the Lions have made their waiver claim. They have an updated 53-man roster. Some additional moves could be made as we're recording, and we'll look at it. But joining me is my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski, and he's not going to bullshit anyone. He's going to keep it real. He's going to tell you what he thinks on this roster. No fluff. And that's why I'm enjoying, and I can't wait to get his perspective. Cuz, have to bring you in, have to see what you think right now as we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. What do you think of the Lions 53-man roster without David Blau and Tim Boyle? I just give the Lions an applause for doing that. Thank you. Moved on from the backups. We'll complain about that in a minute, but your first thoughts on this Lions initial 53-man roster.
So there were a couple of moves that were made that surprised me a little bit, but overall, I mean, I think you have a team that's going to be competitive. I think you have a team that is going to kind of push where they were last year. I think this is a team that's got a little bit more depth than it did last year. This is a team that is going to give you a run for your money. Look, they might not win every game, and honestly, the way we've got this season predicted, I don't think they're going to win a ton of games, but I think this is going to be a much better team than what we got last year. And when you're going through this phase that they're in, where they're trying to rebuild, this is what it is. This is exactly what you can get. You know what I'm saying? You can't expect, I guess, a worst to first. I know that happens almost every single year in the NFL, but it doesn't happen to the Lions. And I don't think the Lions are trying to build that way. I think they're trying to build a actual contender, and I think they're doing it the right way. And with the moves that were made with the roster, I think I'm in agreement with a lot of things. There were a couple of things that surprised me, and we can kind of get into that. But overall, I think this is a really good roster. And I think when you look at what took place with the backup quarterbacks, it kind of tells you everything you need to know. Going into that final game against Pittsburgh, it was up for grabs, and the coaches were honest. And the thing I found most striking was this coaching staff really wanted Tim Boyle. This coaching staff really wanted it to be him. If you go back to last year, David Blau came back healthy, and David Blau was healthy, and they basically rushed Tim Boyle in from an injury to try to get him to play because they believed in him so much. And it really didn't work out. You fast forward to this offseason, they don't really address the backup quarterback position. They think they've got it figured out. They'll let these two guys duke it out, and whoever wins, wins. And they've given Tim Boyle opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and he just fell apart. He just couldn't win that job. Has a really bad interception in the game against Pittsburgh, and it kind of sealed his fate. Next thing you know, David Blau comes in, and he does just enough to beat Tim Boyle, but nobody was impressed. You weren't impressed by what you seen on Sunday. There was nothing really good that you could be like, okay, that's our guy. He can help us win a game. There was nothing like that. Basically what you got was you had the best of a bad bunch, and you're like, well, I guess we'll go with this guy. What I found to be kind of remarkable was the way that they handled it. Tim Boyle didn't get to make it to final cutdown day. They basically pulled no strings. They're like, Tim, you're gone. Like the moment they could cut Tim Boyle, they cut Tim Boyle, which I thought was impressive because, again, this is a coaching staff that I believe really and truly wanted to keep him on this roster, at least making their way through this off season. And then you look at David Blau, and they're like, well, we're stuck with David. That's fine. We'll see what we can do. Things happen on the waiver wire. Guys get cut. They're out there picking up a guy who they were looking to trade for earlier this year. And they bring him in, and then David Blau, you're gone. Zero loyalty. And you know what? Sometimes you need that as an organization. If this organization is going to take the steps forward, and this organization is going to be one of those teams that is contending for playoff spots and contending for Super Bowls, at certain points, you can't have loyalty to certain guys. And in this case, David Blau is just not a good enough player that you're going to have loyalty to him. So they cut him. They bring in Nate Sudfeld. And look, I like the direction that this lineup and that this organization is taking, and I like what they did with their 53-man roster. I think it was pretty good, especially after a very underwhelming offseason.
Absolutely. I think that the part that we can gripe about is you and I, we podcast, we watch the Lions. Did they really need an entire training camp to know that Blau and Boyle shouldn't be on the roster?
No, bro.
Exactly. That's the part that makes me sometimes question the likes of the highest level of evaluators. Like, if you would have sat me and you down and said, okay, should the Lions bring back Boyle and Blau? What would the odds have been that we would have been wrong? Probably, 5%? Like, was really David Blau going to go end up on the Titans or on the Jets and end up lighting up the world? No. Was Tim Boyle going to end up going to the Dolphins or going to the Rams or Chargers or Chiefs and end up burning the Detroit Lions? No. So what is this issue that the Lions are having? And I get the people that are like, well, this backup quarterback talk is crazy and everybody's focusing in on it too much. But here's the point. When you then go and have this battle and you cut both of them and you bring in a Nate Sudfeld, I'm not saying, okay, fine, that there's going to be this world beater backup quarterback like a Steve Young who sat behind Joe Montana. That's not the likes of how things go. I get that. But all I have to argue is if there is one, just one backup that's better than Sudfeld, I'm pissed. And that's how you have to be if you're somebody looking and striving to be the best at what you do. If there's one, and I know you know and you're going to say that there are better backups that they could have claimed. I mean, Robert Saleh could have been blowing smoke up people's butt, but he said, this backup that we just threw out there that we cut because of numbers, we believe he just had the best play of a quarterback in a preseason that I've ever seen in Strevler. You're telling me that you wouldn't risk it on a guy like that or somebody like a Kellen Mond who was drafted high by a team in your division? You wouldn't take a chance on that as opposed to a 6'6" big tall quarterback that hasn't played since 2020? Real fast, when you come in at me and you say, oh, you guys are just focusing in on too much on the backups and things like that, all I'm saying is the Lions are not emphasizing the backup enough. You don't have to go and get a C- backup. Just give us a B. Somebody that's better than what you've had.
Yep. If you look at what Dan Campbell said in regards to what does a backup quarterback have to do? Like what does he define a backup quarterback's role on this team as? And I think if you were to line that up with the performances that you got from Tim Boyle and what you got from David Blau, it falls way short. Is that it's a guy who can basically come in and help you win a game. If a starter goes down in the middle of a game, can this guy come in and essentially manage the game and help you win it? You didn't feel like David Blau or Tim Boyle, even if they had a week's worth of reps, 2 weeks worth of reps, were going to be able to come in and win you a football game. Neither one of those guys were even game managers. So even if you had a good enough team where you could run the football 60 times in a game, only throw it 15 times in the game, and still complete 13 of those 15 passes, you still didn't feel like you were going to win that game, even with those guys managing it, because at some point there was going to be a fumble. At some point there was going to be an interception. At some point they were going to do something that was going to cost you. You know, I was really pulling for David Blau. I thought he was a very interesting character. If you watched any of the Hard Knocks, I think they did a really good job really building him out as one of those affable characters that you were kind of pulling for, that you were rooting for, and that you wanted to make this team. And it was just time after time after time. If you go back to that first preseason game, they lost that game because he bobbled a snap. You go back to the game against Pittsburgh, there were multiple times where he bobbled snaps. That final drive, he bobbled a snap. So these are just preseason games. These games don't matter. And he's going up against third and fourth string guys who are trying to make the roster, and he's still kind of struggling with these things. What happens when he gets inserted into a game? And now he's going up against a TJ Watt. He's now going up against a starting defensive end. He's now going up against a big-ass 400-pound nose tackle. He's now going up against a linebacker who wants to punch him in the face. What's going to happen then? Everything gets magnified. It amplified when you get into the regular season. Preseason, honestly, it is like a orchestrated scrimmage. There's a little bit of the heat gets turned up. But what I'm saying is, like, we're going from being at like a 2-3 in practice, and sometimes practices are more intense than what you're getting in the preseason games. It's maybe getting ratcheted up to 4 or 5. When you're actually playing the game, when you're on the field, it is cranked up to 11. So it just gets magnified that much more, and those mistakes get magnified that much more. And I don't think you nor I actually believed that David Blau or Tim Boyle could come into a game and help manage it. Not win it for you, but help manage it so you don't lose it. And look, I don't know if Sudfeld is going to be able to come in and be able to give you more than what those guys gave you. But I'll tell you this much. This coaching staff and this front office believe that. And at this moment in time, you got to ride with it. You know, Sudfeld has basically 2 weeks to cram and learn this playbook. Jared Goff, he can take the reins and kind of run with it. But I like the move. I think it tells you everything you need to know about this coaching staff.
Yeah, it's very interesting the level of fondness the Lions front office has for their own drafted players. I mean, Chase Lucas and Jamar Jefferson, I think, are prime examples where you could say, well, the Lions could have decided to go elsewhere, and now there's a potential chance that you're going to bring back Justin Jackson back to the roster with a corresponding move. So we'll see how that plays out. But I'm thinking that potentially the Detroit Lions have a philosophy in place regarding the players that they evaluate, but it can be questioned. And I think they could have did better by potentially maybe looking at some of the draft picks they've made in the second round, by looking at some of the running backs that they've decided to keep. Jamar Jefferson, Chase Lucas are okay, but you've decided to move on from A.J. Parker, who was your starting nickelback. He wasn't good enough, and you decided to roll in a different direction. So there are question marks there. What did you make of the Lions keeping 4 tight ends? I think maybe some people felt that was very weird to a lot of people because you feel like you can roll with 3, but just kind of signaled to me that it's a tougher position that they want to count on, especially if they're going to emphasize the run to start the year.
I mean, if you're going to run with 2 tight end sets, okay, I get it, but I thought that was strange. You can usually get by with 3 tight ends. If something happens, you go grab a guy, bring him in and have him block for you, because that's essentially what he's doing at that point. I thought that was a really strange move. When I was going through this roster, I thought that was kind of bonkers to me. And I think you're right. When you look at the guys that were cut, especially from that secondary, a guy like A.J. Parker, Savion Smith had a great preseason. That was a guy who I thought for sure was making this roster. And cornerback is usually a position that is nothing but attrition. You're usually losing multiple guys as the season goes on. Instead, they decide to waive those guys and release them. So there were a couple of moves that did have me scratching my head. I thought the move to keep 4 tight ends was probably one of the weirdest. I didn't understand that. I was like, okay, this is the direction we're going, eh? Because you could do just about anything else if you really wanted to, and instead you're going to invest more of a resource into that position. And I'm not really sure if that position necessarily warrants it. You know what I'm saying? So I did find that to be a little bit head-scratching.
Yeah, it's absolutely one of those things where you look at it and you say, you can see holes in the Lions roster. Now, I like that they kept 9 offensive linemen. I know it was tough. Many people didn't think Logan Stenberg was going to potentially have an opportunity to maybe make this team, but he does. And I think that you saw on Hard Knocks that Hank Fraley was trying to get the Lions to hold 10 if he wanted to. But 9 is good. I think this offensive line with the reserves, those reserves are solid, especially with Evan Brown and Matt Nelson. Tommy Kramer and Stenberg are the two that you got to question the most, but those are guys that are young that want to be and are hopeful to be developed by this coaching staff. So overall, I would give the Lions grade of the roster a B+. I think that I know many people, and I don't think you're going to be that shocked by it and are going to have a strong opinion on it, but I do think that Tom Kennedy, when you look at one player that could embody, in baseball terms, like a 4A, 5A type player that's really good against reserves, but when you put him up against the likes of the top end, what can he accomplish? I would have liked to have seen it. Now, am I pissed that he didn't make it? No. But when you listen to the coach and the Lions and you say, hey, what kind of player are you looking for? All Tom Kennedy could do was what he was asked to, which was go out there and make plays. Now, are there better? Yeah, obviously they decided to keep just 5 receivers, and they're waiting on Jamison Williams. But Tom Kennedy, I thought, at least could have been done maybe like David Blau. Let him make the roster and then cut him the next day. Like, it's been done before, and I know it's silly and it's semantics, but for one spot, I would have been okay if you would have kept Tom Kennedy. At least see what he's got for a game or two. I think the guy deserved at least an opportunity, and then you cut him. But I think that he's at least back on the practice squad, which will make some people happy. What'd you make of the whole Tom Kennedy situation? Because it's real interesting. A hard worker, a grinder. I think somebody that we all can relate to, but maybe just not. He's like, really, in the end, he's like the number 54 the best player on a team, and it sucks for him.
Yeah, I mean, this was a guy who last week when we talked about it, if there was going to be anybody who was going to possibly be cut that might surprise you, or a guy who was kind of on the bubble, was he going to make it or not? And to be honest with you, I'm not surprised that he's not making it. He did everything he was asked, right? He embodied everything that Dan Campbell wanted. He had grit, he had toughness, he worked hard, showed up every day, brought his lunch pail, brought his hard hat, did everything in the world you could ask of the guy, and he still got cut. And I think the reason he gets cut is because he is a wide receiver. He is essentially just a wide receiver. You couldn't use him on special teams. Remember when we talked last week, if you're going to be that low on the depth chart for your position, you've got to be able to do other things. You've got to be able to fill in and give spot duty on special teams, whether it's going to be a gunner on the punt return team, whether it's going to be on the hands team, and you're going to replace one of the other guys on the hands team, which obviously you can play just about any wide receiver or running back on your hands team, or you need to be able to return kicks if you're going to be on a return team. He just didn't do any of those things. He hasn't done any of those things, and there were other guys on this roster who were able to do those things better than him, and I think that's why he got cut. I mean, that is the reason why this man's not on this team. And you're right. On a roster of 53 guys, he's essentially your 54th best player. He is to liken it to your baseball analogy, he is a 4A player. Does a lot of things really, really good, but when you really compare him to an actual pro,
yeah,
how good is he really? You know?
And does it stink? Does it stink though? Is it more because of size? The man is undersized, and against other bigger secondary players, I think he might get overshadowed. I think it's one of those things where the measurables just don't measure up.
I don't know if it's so much his size. Again, I just blame it on his versatility. You've seen guys like Wes Welker, Danny Amendola, Danny Woodhead. Those guys are all extremely undersized guys, and I think Tom Kennedy falls into that category with them. If you could get separation and you could make plays, they're going to find a spot for you on the roster. All of those guys that I just mentioned, they were all able to do different things on different specialty units. Julian Edelman was a guy who, pretty undersized, was able to play quarterback in college, so he can throw a football if you needed him to. He's a guy who can play slot, obviously. He was a guy who started off as a cornerback, so he was able to play different positions. Wes Welker, a pretty good wide receiver, but he could also return kicks and punts. I think initially he started off as a gunner on a return team. And then you look at a guy like Danny Woodhead. Danny Woodhead was the same thing. He was a special teams guy and was able to make it as a running back. And then they moved him around, put him in slot. So you have to be able to, again, if you're going to be that low on the depth chart and you're going to be that undersized, where you're not being kept because you're 6'4" and you can jump out of a building, you're going to have to find a way to diversify your skill set and be able to show those things. And you don't necessarily have to be elite at them, but you have to be better than the guy who's in front of you, and you better be better than the guy who's behind you. And Tom Kennedy just wasn't that. This is what's going to end up happening. Tom Kennedy's going to get cut. There's going to be an injury the first week of the regular season. Somebody's going to go out, pick him up, bring him in, and the guy's gonna be a fourth string wide receiver, gonna go in, is gonna make a couple of good plays, and Lions fans are gonna be upset about it. She's like, oh, that's our guy. But really and truly, in the long term, he's probably gonna amount to having 1, maybe 2 years of some moderate football success. Not really enough to keep him on the roster to where he's going to be able to help fulfill you with making big plays or help fulfill where this roster is trying to go. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me. And I don't think his size necessarily had anything to do with it. I think it was more just his overall talent and being able to fit in different packages, you know? Again, would you not agree that if you are maybe not the best wide receiver, maybe not the best cornerback, maybe not the best in your position group, or at least you're not in the top 3 of your position group, you have to be able to do something else? You have to be versatile, and I think that's what it comes down to, especially with Tom Kennedy. He's just not a versatile player. You can't put him in a different spot, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Right. It's it's one of those things with a young player that you realize that may be his spot, that he's got a spot on the team. He'll give the team a bunch of looks, you know, similar to what a Devonta Smith could be for the Eagles. So a practice squad player still makes good money, upwards of $10,000 to $15,000 a week, and you don't have to suit up on Sunday. You get to maybe extend your career. But it just kind of stinks because he's a hard worker, and it just kind of stinks that he's kind of always going to be looked at as that practice squad 4A, 5A type of player. But let's talk to the cream of the crop, or hopefully the cream of the crop for the Detroit Lions secondary. Jeff Okudah, after the Lions 19-9 loss against the Steelers, Dan Campbell comes out and just basically says, look, Jeff Okudah is going to be cornerback number 2 opposite of Amani Oruwariye, and he earns the spot. He defeats Will Harris, which was expected when you saw at the tail end of training camp, Okudah started making plays, made a play against the Steelers. So that's fine. He doesn't have to live with the result of a battle with Will Harris, which probably shouldn't have been phrased that way by the team, but it was true. The honest truth is he was battling with a couple guys to get his job back. But in the end, when you're the number 3 pick and you're allocated over $9 million in salary cap space, unless you're really abysmal, you should end up getting the job. I think it's good. I think his play has been really intriguing. I think it good enough to say that he's on fair grounds to evaluate him fairly. Week 1, how does he do against the Eagles? Hopefully he doesn't get torched. Hopefully he's part of a secondary that performs a little bit better as a result of a defensive line that is ramped up. So I think it's encouraging that one of the bright spots of the Lions training camp, outside of Hutchinson, the rookies, and the play of the offense, is cornerback Jeff Okudah has a legit chance to give us a real chance to evaluate what he can do this year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see where he goes, right? Because, again, drafted 3rd overall, ton of expectations. Obviously, first 2 years don't go as planned. He's out with injury. It really feels like this is a brand new piece to this team. I don't necessarily like this piece. I don't like Jeff Okudah. But at this moment in time, with this coaching staff, I'm willing to give him another shot. And for me, and I don't know how it feels to you, but for me, this is kind of it. This is the year. You need to show me what you can do this season before I completely write you off. Like, I basically have you hanging over the edge and I'm about to drop you in the trash. Before I let you go, I'm going to give you 17 more games to show me that you deserve to be in this league, that you deserve to be in this position and be the starting cornerback for this team. Look, I was rooting against Jeff Okudah. I'll be honest with you. I didn't want him to get this position. I wanted him to be one of those hard cuts. I wanted him to be a guy that this team had to move away from. He's done everything he could do to basically come back from an ACL injury. He battled and fought and got his job back. Now here's the ball. Let's see if you can run with it. It's going to be interesting to me to see how he ends up performing this season. Like, what does he actually look like with live rounds? Because through most of the preseason, he looked pretty good. There were a couple plays that maybe he gave up, but he initially made, after the play was given up, he immediately made a tackle, made a play. Like you said, in the Pittsburgh game, made a play in that game. So he was making plays. I want to see that translate into the regular season, and I really want to see him take off. And if he can, then cool. I will eat all of the bad words that I've said about Jeff Okudah, and I will pull it all back. But look, I was a little shocked that he won his job back. I thought last year Will Harris played pretty good in his position. So we'll kind of see what happens here. I'm not thinking he's going to be a world beater. I'll be honest with you, I was a little let down by Amani Arawariye. I thought he would kind of come in and he would put a stranglehold on that number one cornerback position, and he is the number one cornerback, but it was a little bit up and down this preseason. I didn't expect that. So Jeff Okudah comes in, done a really good job recovering and rehabbing. Let's see what he's got. I'm willing to give him a chance, and I'm willing to eat all the bad words that I said about this man if he can prove me wrong. So we'll kind of see what happens here with week 1 coming up in, 10 days here? 10 days or so?
Yep, exactly. So here we go. Real quickly, a couple minutes, I do want to get your thoughts on the Lions' 4th episode of Hard Knocks. I am kind of getting the sense similar to what other people are saying. I'm excited, but I'm inside. We podcast, we know about the Lions. So I think the timing of it absolutely sucks that we're watching a scene with Khalil Pimpleton and Obina Easy, and you realize these guys are already gone. By the time that episode airs at 10 p.m. at night, we've already seen the roster. We're already on to other things. You got to remember, the roster's released at 4:05 on a Tuesday, and they broadcast it. You know how much information can really be passed in 6 hours? So we've already gone on to grades and what we think and other moves and other type stuff. So it's weird in that Hard Knocks feels dated in the way 6 hours later, you're like, okay, Khalil Pimpleton's already cut. You see him highlighted and he drops the ball. It doesn't weigh the same because you're like, yeah, we already knew that he suffered the consequence of the ultimate mistake. And it just stinks because, I know they don't know and they have to cut it in that certain way, but it just sucks because it takes all of the intrigue out of. Now, I think the other part that I think people are going to like is finally seeing what Dan Campbell tells these guys when they get cut, when David Blau, if he gets a call, or others that get cut, how they get treated. But I'm enjoying it just for the fact that it's an inside look, just to see things that I've lived and other stuff that we've watched and covered. But I do get the likes of those that will say, well, this is really not meant for Lions fans because it's meant for a target audience of a large broader national audience to get people that are not fans of the Lions to know better. But is that what you really want them to know, is Craig Reynolds, the third string running back, and Khalil Pimpleton and Obina Easy, guys that are like number 3 and below on the depth chart? Like, I would have loved to have seen maybe just one feature on DeAndre Swift, a feature on Josh Reynolds. I mean, they literally went, if you're a starter, you're not getting featured? Like, what the hell? Craig Reynolds gets some love? But I thought the scene with him saying he put icy hot on his balls is funny. laughing at Jamar Jefferson. There were some laughs, but it's fading. It's like each episode is not hitting that crescendo in regards to, and the question and the theme of this show is, are you meeting the potential? It just feels like it could be better, and I hate to say that. It could be better.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel dated, and I really wanted to see some cuts. It's kind of what I was tuning in for. And it was weird because as the show's unfolding, I'm like, he's cut. Like, I'm saying this stuff out loud to my girlfriend. I'm like, he's cut. I was like, he doesn't make the team. And she's like, really? Why? And it's like, as he's dropping balls in end zones, she's like, oh, that makes sense. And it's like, it does feel like it's a bit of a stale, dated product at this point. I will tell you this much. I did pop a little bit when you got to see Ben Johnson actually talk. I was like, oh, he does exist. And then Jared Goff actually spoke, and I was like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. He's alive. They basically brought him out of the mothballs and shook him out. But you're right. There's nothing interesting. There's nobody on this team that's really interesting. And the guys who are basically gone from this team, they built the entire program around them. And it's like, you didn't get to see anybody get cut. You didn't get to see any of those hard decisions. Now that's coming next week, but we're already moving on. We're already past this. You know, it's like football is incredibly fast. Like it's here today, gone tomorrow. We're already moving on, and they're like, wait, hold on. We still got to cover this. And we're like, yeah, that was last week. We're looking forward to what's about to take place here when the Lions take on the Eagles. So it does feel a little bit stale, and it could be a little bit better. And you're right. It's not made for the Detroit Lions fan. It is made for John and Sally, who live in San Diego, and they like football, and they're like, oh, let's watch about the Detroit Lions, and let's see what's going on with them. And that's what it's there for. That's all it's there for. It's not for us.
Exactly. But it is for us, too, in that you get to see a little bit, which I will say, while we have critiques, we will give the opposite side, too, and be fair. I am liking to see Aaron Glenn get pissed off at the defense, because I'm out there watching and I see what he said. You know, I'm not trying to spin it in any different way. I asked a question online that got a little bit of pushback. I said, hey, is anybody concerned about Amani Oruwariye? He hasn't had the best 10 days in camp. Why did I post that? It's not because I want to be overly critical, because to set the foundation, the Lions said and the coaching staff said, per Aaron Glenn, the next step for him is to become, or one of the coaching staffs, you know, it eludes me, but I feel like it was from Aaron Glenn. One of the coaches said, at least, they want Amani Oruwariye to be a shutdown corner. Now, did you get that from what I saw at practice every day at Allen Park? No, I didn't see a shutdown corner. I saw what Aaron Glenn was cussing up a storm about. They were like, what the fuck are you guys doing? 70% of passes you guys are giving up in this practice. So I have eyes. I saw the same thing, and I saw the receivers beating them. But obviously, it's set up that way with a lot of the drills. But at a certain point in practice, you can see that the defensive backs were not as competitive as they needed to be. Fight for the ball, punch the ball, make it so that if a Lions player is going to be open, you close quickly, not to give up big play after big play, catch after catch. And so Aaron Glenn got pissed. I wanted to see that. I want to see Dan Campbell go, what the fuck, when he sees Tim Boyle throw one of the ugliest passes you're going to see. You're going to hear Dan Campbell respectfully say, well, we gave Khalil Pimpleton a chance. We put him out there, and I think we know. That's real. No spin, no bullshit. That's what they talk like. And that's what I wanted to see. How do they address the shit that they see? Because football players, it's not all nicey nice all the time where you get what you get in front of cameras. That's all spin and put in a positive light. You know, at times you'll get a coach that says, hey, I need more out of this and more out of that. But a lot of times it's, hey, the ceiling's high. We like what he's doing. They're working hard. All the spin that you get that you got to sift through. But I really like to see that. I like to see the additional other side of it where the coaches are like, what the fuck are you doing? This is not what I'm looking for. And then the other part was interesting too, is I like to see the fun stuff that they do where Dan Campbell goes up there and highlights something stupid that the team was doing when a rope snaps and everyone's laughing at Jamar Jefferson. So that side of it's cool to see a different look that you don't get to see, where you get the sarcastic jokes and stuff like that. So Hard Knocks, like I said, B minus. It's good. But yeah, for the hardcore fan, for the hardcore Lions fan, you pretty much know what's going on with everything. So we'll see how the finale looks. I can't wait to review it with you overall. And pay attention. You might see a bald, middle-aged reporter out there locking in on Aiden Hutchinson and Jared Goff for the .025 seconds that the screen allotted. So it's very cool where the podcast has reached. All right, cuz, now we get to sit back and enjoy the fruits of the labor, the fun part of football, college football. And we got to hit on the chaos and the nonsense that's going on with Michigan State. It's fun, man. This is now the fun time where every year we get to preview what's going on with Michigan and Michigan State. But we always have to hit Big Blue country as they start the year. And I think, in my opinion, now I know people are looking at the quarterback situation with Cade and JJ, and I know you're going to have a very strong opinion on it. But one caveat that I think we have to throw out there is the schedule allows it. Now, if they were opening against Notre Dame and Washington and Oregon and the likes of those that can compete, then you could say, well, starting Cade and then starting JJ is a problem. But to be honest, Michigan scheduled such a piss-poor, weak schedule that they could even play their third string, and it's not a big deal at this point. But Jim Harbaugh is doing something out of the ordinary, unconventional, by not naming a true number one. What do you make of how this could play out? Why is Jim Harbaugh not willing to say, hey, Cade McNamara took me to the dance, he's the number one? Is he that scared of JJ transferring? I think being a leader indicates that you got to make the tough decision. I'm always of the opinion, and it's so true, tried and true, if you have two quarterbacks, then you have none. So what's the deal with Jim Harbaugh over there at Michigan? From a guy that follows the team and really supports what the Wolverines are into, and as somebody that watches the Michigan Wolverines, can this derail a season by having this controversy? Because it's going to play out to be, hey, play these two games against Cupcakes and let's see what happens.
So, look, this is like my favorite time of year. This is probably one of my favorite podcasts to do. We get to look at the lines, and they're entering into the regular season. It's basically week one of college football. Michigan and Michigan State are getting ready to play and getting geared up to open up their season. So this is one of my favorite times of year. And I hate the fact that we've got to talk about possibly a quarterback controversy, which doesn't make any sense to me. I think this is stupid. And I agree with you. If you got two quarterbacks and you have none, like this isn't some kind of a trick offense that you can run. It's not like it's the early 1990s where you can run two QBs and you're like, oh, one's going to be my passing QB, one's going to be my running QB, and like running QBs are a new thing, and it's like fresh and it's wild and it's crazy, and the running QB is able to go out there and basically pull off moves like Michael Vick. It's not that anymore. And honestly, you don't have a quarterback like that on this roster. I don't understand what Jim Harbaugh is doing here. I don't understand why this is the situation. And look, I get the argument that is being made where they're like, hey, Cade's going to take game one, JJ's going to take game two, and it's like an extended preseason for college because honestly, their first three games are absolutely trash. If you're a season ticket holder, you should be pissed off that three games are taken up with what you're about to witness and what you're about to see. It's absolute garbage. But look, you can make that argument. I still think it's stupid and I think it's flawed. You basically had an entire offseason. On top of that, you had other workout programs that were going on. And if J.J. McCarthy can't beat out Cade McNamara at this point, then what the hell are we talking about? Go with the guy who got you to the dance. Go with the guy who takes care of the ball. Go with the guy who can make a few moves with his legs. Go with the guy who, when under duress, can put the ball in the right spot. Go with the guy who's a little bit more accurate. I don't necessarily care that he's not as swift of foot. He's not as elite with his arm. It's not as deep and as strong as JJ's. I don't care about that. You look at what cost Michigan from essentially having the perfect season last year. It was JJ. It was forced plays in the Michigan State game where Michigan was trying to get JJ into the game and he was trying to make a play and he fumbled the ball and he turned it over. The big difference between both of these quarterbacks is one turns the ball over at a two times more rate than the other quarterback. That's what the big issue is here. Yeah, one is tantalizing because he's got legs and he's got a cannon for an arm. That's cool. It doesn't mean a damn thing when you're throwing the football and it's missing its mark by 15 yards. And it doesn't matter, and it doesn't mean a damn thing when you're throwing the football and it's going to the other color jersey and they're running it back on you. At that point, it doesn't matter. What matters is putting the ball in the right place at the right time and going to the right read. That's what matters. And if one guy does that better than the other, why are we having this conversation? You had a ton of games last season that showed you who that guy was. And now you've gone into the offseason and the other guy that you want to take the reins hasn't done it yet, hasn't been able to do it. So now we're going to go into what's going to essentially amount to two preseason games here. And you're going to give one guy a bunch of rope and some run. You're going to give the other guy a bunch of rope and some run. And what are you going to do? You're going to go and you're going to look at the stats and see which one threw better? Is that what we're going to do? You're going to do the eyeball test where you're going to look and see which one possessed the offense a little bit better, which one controlled the game a little bit more? Like how are we going to decide this? Because it's not like the two offenses and the two defenses that this team is facing are going to be the same. So I don't know how Jim Harbaugh is going to make this comparison and basically come away with who he wants to start game 3 and then put them into game 3 and let them basically take the reins for the rest of the season. I don't understand how we ended up here. I don't know why we're here. I really felt like at the end of last year, especially in the Ohio State game, after the Ohio State game, you've seen what you had with Cade. And yeah, the floor is much higher and maybe the ceiling's a little bit lower. But you know what? If it works, it works. And if it gets the job done, then what the hell are we doing here? You know, like, I'll ask you this. You don't like Michigan. You usually have very harsh words towards Michigan. Is Michigan in the realm of a team like Ohio State perennially, Alabama, Georgia, LSU when they're firing? Are they in the mix with teams like Oklahoma when they're going? Does Michigan strike you as a team that runs an offense like those programs? Because they don't to me. Like Michigan's calling card last year was ground and pound. I don't care that Josh Gaddis was here. They basically ran Harbaugh's offense. It was ground and pound, and you know what? They would open it up sometimes downfield. You know, your leading wide receiver last year had under 700 yards. That's kind of crazy this day and age in college football. Your leading wide receiver had less than 700 yards. Bonkers, wow, if you really think about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's the biggest complaint on Michigan is people want to see more of an explosive offense, and that's what's really crazy is this quarterback situation is so divisive with Cade and with J.J. McCarthy, because I think either way the program is going to take a lot of heat because there's a big support for Cade, there's a big support for J.J., and this is crazy because I think this is what happens where you might just want to have to let one of them go.
Yeah, I mean, and look, maybe that's why Jim's doing what he's doing, right? Because after you play so many games in a season, or you've taken part in so many games in a season, you end up burning, a year of transfer, or you've got to wait out a year of transferring. So, look, I don't know. I don't know what the reason is, and I don't know why Jim's doing this, and I don't know why we're here. I mean, is the case really this? Is it really that close? Is it really that close that JJ couldn't beat out Cade? Because I'll be honest with you, if that's the case, if JJ has gotten to the point where he is damn near eclipsing what Cade has done and has given you, then there's your answer. Just go with JJ. Give him all the reps. Think about how much better and how much faster he would basically round into form to be the quarterback that you want if he's the guy. And look, I know it's hard to tell the guy who helped get you to the promised land, like, hey, we're going to go in this direction because he's better. He gives us our better chance to win. But you know what? Alabama did it. Alabama did it in a championship game, in a BCS championship game. Jalen Hurts got him to the promised land, and in the second half they came out and went to Tua. They're like, Tua's going to take this, and Tua ends up winning them a championship. Clemson, the year that they ended up making it to the college football playoffs and winning it, it was the same deal. They had a quarterback there from last year, the guy who was prepped and ready to go. But you know what? Trevor Lawrence came in, stole the show, and helped them win a national championship. It's been done. Make the hard decision. That's why you're the head coach. Make the hard decision. You know what I'm saying? Look, I don't know if it's to keep one guy here or not, but what I'm telling you is what is going on. I don't feel like it's very good for the program. It's hard when you've got a guy who's been selected as your captain of your team, and you're like, hey, you're still in competition with this guy, because it really feels like they want to just give it to that guy, but that guy hasn't taken the reins. You know what? It kind of feels like what you're watching with the Detroit Lions in their backup quarterback situations, just a little bit different. Instead of two guys not being good enough to take the reins, you've got two guys who are maybe too good, and just one guy hasn't fully taken charge. But at some point, as a head coach, you got to make that decision and be like, we're rolling with this guy because he gives us the best chance to win. And I just don't feel like it's that hard. You know, you and I both have played sports. I've played probably more team sports than you have, and there are certain points where I've been the captain and I've been the coach of different teams. And you know what? You have to have that honest assessment with yourself where you're like, you know what? I'm not the best player on this team, you've got to make that hard call and say, these guys over here give us the best chance to win. And you know what? You have to have that conversation sometimes, and you got to put those guys in position to win. So if, like, in my case, if it means benching myself and putting other guys out there to make those plays, that's what you do. That's what you have to do. You know, as a head coach, this is what you're being paid to do. Make those hard decisions. Put the best guy on the team who gives you the best ability to win. Whether it's Kate or whether it's JJ, just make a damn decision. Don't make this hard, and don't be weird about it. Everything Harbaugh does is freaking weird.
Yeah, it tends to be very weird. But we do have to give what I think is a potential flowers to the program, in that I think what people can hang their hat on is that Michigan's offense and what they've started to build has been really spectacular. I think the running backs, the wide receivers have the potential to make both quarterbacks look really good. And I know you have 2 new coordinators. That's why maybe this schedule favors a lot of what Michigan's trying to do, especially after losing so much defensively. But you have to be impressed that if the team can steadily get better, what they're doing with Donovan Edwards, the wide receivers, I believe the wide receiver Thomas that kind of came out of nowhere last year, obviously that came out of Michigan State's backyard, had a great game against Michigan State. I want to say that Michigan's offense has the potential to do a lot of good things, and that's the kind of the consistency that you want to see. And I think you have to give them credit. Now, the big question mark is, and I want to get your sense of it, what do you make of the offense and defense, and how much of a drop-off is losing 2 bookend defensive linemen to the first round of the NFL draft? How much impact is it going to have? And I think, too, let's not underrate what Ronnie Bell coming back means for the Michigan Wolverines. I think that player is emerging and has been prone to make plays. So I think that you have an opportunity to have a lot of great production from Cornelius Johnson, from Ronnie Bell, Roman Wilson. I said Thomas. Andrell Anthony was the running back. Andrell Anthony was the wide receiver who came out and just blew it up. So you guys got wide receivers galore, and I think that it lends to really a lot of hope for the offense. But the defense is going to be the biggest question mark, especially with the turnover.
Yeah, I totally agree with you 110%. I think offensively, once they figure out who their quarterback is, I think everybody can kind of slot in where they kind of need to be. I feel like this offense has brought a lot of guys back. You've got Blake Corum, you've got Donovan Edwards as your running back, you've got Eric All, who was a fantastic tight end last year. You mentioned Ronnie Bell, who's back. You've got Andrell Anthony, who took a monster step forward and kind of came out of nowhere last year as a wide receiver. Cornelius Johnson, he was your leading wide receiver last year. So you've got guys. If that offensive line takes that step forward and can hold up, I think offensively this team is ready to go. Now defensively, how do you replace all that production from last year? And doing it, you've got a new defensive coordinator. Now, the way I understand it, Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator, basically was doing the same exact thing that they were doing last year. Nothing has changed. Philosophy hasn't changed. Word is that they're even playing faster. So, do you get production, or do you find a way to duplicate the production that you were getting out of Ajabo and out of Aiden Hutchinson last year from a collection of guys? If you're able to do that, I think this defense will be really, really good. As far as defense goes, though, I just don't know. I don't know if a guy like Mike Morris or a guy like Jalen Harnell are going to be able to put the pressure on the quarterback like that, like they did last year. So I think defensively we'll have to wait and see. I think offensively it's just kind of like locked and loaded. Just turn the key, let's go. So yeah. It's going to be really weird to see how this defense comes out, and if they take that step forward, if they are playing faster, like all of the reports are that are coming out of Michigan right now. So we just kind of have to wait and see. I think realistically, this is a team that should be contending for a Big Ten championship this year. This is a team that should be going up against the likes of Ohio State and MSU and really looking to extend win streaks and continue on winning and playing into that Big Ten championship game.
Okay.
I don't know if it happens. I see this team losing 2 games this year.
Yep.
And maybe ends up finishing second in the Big Ten East here. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how the season plays out.
Yeah, now to turn our attention to Sparty Land. I do want to give both programs credit. They've given us a lot more access over the last couple years and allowing us to have access to video and highlights and all of the press clippings. So thank you to finally, after knocking for so long, opening the door just a little bit wider to the Detroit Sports Podcast, having the opportunity to get some more insight so that we can bring to you guys. Michigan State, I think this year is going to be really telling as to how the philosophy of Mel Tucker is working after an 11-2 year, but getting shellacked by Ohio State. It exposed everything that Mel Tucker was trying to hide and limit, which was the play of the secondary and the defensive line. So Tucker went out and was humbly forced to address the secondary, the poorest secondary, and picked up a pair of transfers at linebacker and defensive back, used the portal very well to try and make this defense a little bit dirty. And the thing that's going to be interesting to see is, with his background, Mel Tucker, on defense. Remember, former NFL coach, interim with the Jaguars, his history working with Nick Saban. He put his hands now and is getting his hands dirty more with the cornerbacks because it was so bad last year, because it was embarrassingly bad in regards to how Ohio State exposed that weakness for Michigan State. So now, like with anything, Peyton Thorne's going to take a year ahead. I think that, with his progression, that offense should be in line with some really good talent across the board. The big thing, though, is you can't expect the same level of production offensively when you lose the likes of a Kenneth Walker, which is the biggest loss that the Spartans had. So the biggest question marks, I think, are going to be how are they going to reproduce the run game and to have that home run threat, because, bro, you know how juicy that was to scare teams with the threat of handing it off to Kenneth Walker. Aiden Hutchinson still has nightmares about Kenneth Walker and getting blocked out of the way and seeing all those touchdowns. I think Kenneth Walker just scored another touchdown on the Wolverines. That's how good he was. Can they replace that level of production and home run threat and the ability to make key plays? But I think Peyton Thorne's going to be a leader. I'm really excited to see October 8th. I think I'll have a chance to be there in person. The Spartans are going to take on Ohio State. So I think 56-7 was the shellacking they took. I'm hoping that can be avenged. But the Spartans, it's crazy. It's kind of like a team that is good is there, but they're very under the radar. It's really interesting just how much everything that goes on at Michigan just overshadows everything at Michigan State. But there's a lot of question marks on defense. But Mel Tucker, I believe, now has to start earning the contract that he signed. I mean, he signed a hefty deal. Now that they're in the NIL game, they're using the portal. They're doing everything they can to kind of shrink the gap between them and Ohio State. But there's still a big gap, bro. Ohio State is stacked. When you just look at what they can do to teams, if you let off the gas defensively and you struggle and have a bad day with your linebackers and your secondary and the communications off, Ohio State's going to fuck you up. So I'm hoping that as the season starts, the Spartans start off very well on a lot of sides of the football, but I think it's the same. It's kind of has the feel, and I know we say this kind of a lot when we do this, it has the feel that Michigan and Michigan State are going to have near the same records. 2, maybe 3 losses each, maybe some performances that you think are going to be head scratchers. But I do want to see them compete better, obviously, against Michigan. I'm nervous at them going on the road because Michigan is going to be all up in arms, ready to defeat the Spartans, with Mel Tucker winning the first couple games. And the manner in which that game went down last year, playing at Ann Arbor is not thrilling, but I think that'll be the two litmus test as to how much heat can the Spartans program take. And I'm curious to see how they handle the holes. But it's going to be fun. The Big Ten this year is going to be fun, but I still think, like every year, Ohio State's the class, but Michigan and Michigan State actually this year, as opposed to last year, if you remember, we kind of felt like the gap widened. This year, I think the gap incrementally got a little better for both teams. So it gives you a little bit more hope. But, man, how fun was it for you, Cuz, to see what was going on with Nebraska, Scott Frost, to see college football back? It was exciting, at least to check in with some of the games that went down. I love Week 0. I love the fact that college football is back, and I love the fact that we get a chance to break down Michigan State and Michigan each and every week.
I mean, how bad is Scott Frost? Like, what are you doing? Why put your team in a spot like that? That made absolutely no sense to me. I do want to double back to Michigan State, though, because I feel like this is a team who has an outside chance to play and make it to the Final Four and be in that college football playoff. I think this team, if you look at what they're bringing back and you look at how they played last year, look, it's going to be incredibly difficult to replace what you got from Kenneth Walker. And I don't think they're able to do that. I don't think there's a running back on this squad right now who's going to be able to duplicate what that man did, because he played like a generational talent last year. But you're bringing back your starting quarterback, all right? And it's his job. I don't see him losing it. On top of that, you're bringing back two of his top three receivers. So there's a comfort level there. The offensive line, this is now, year 3 under Mel Tucker? This offensive line takes a step forward. I think last year the offensive line was a bit of an issue for this team. I think that offensive line is kind of what held this team back. You look at the defensive side of the ball, I think the linebacking play, I think the defensive line, I think the secondary all take that step forward. Another year in the system. Another year getting good transfers and getting good recruits that are taking another year in another step forward. I think this team has the chance to push Ohio State. I think this team, if you had to pick between Michigan and Michigan State for which team is going to push Ohio State to be the representative for the Big Ten in the college football playoff, I think it's going to be Michigan State. I think Michigan State has a puncher's chance to actually take that and to be the representative for the Big Ten in the college football playoff. I think Michigan State maybe loses one game, and I think it'll be to Ohio State. And that's just because Ohio State is absolutely stacked. But I think you've got a really good team here, and I think year 3 for Mel Tucker is an absolute big deal. And kind of mixed in all of that, Mel Tucker's going to win a 4th game over Jim Harbaugh. If you're a Michigan fan, that's got to piss you off. That's got to make you mad. Like, look, I know you're riding high after what happened last year, and you were able to get as far as you did, and you went to the promised land finally. You didn't go and capture the flag and get what the actual goal is by winning the national championship. But man, 4 years. I'm saying it right now, 4 years. You're going to have a loss to Michigan State, one of your biggest rivals, and you're obviously your biggest in-state rival. That's a big deal. And I think at the end of this year, there's going to be some head scratching going on. Again, I think Michigan's going to have a very good season, but I think that 4th loss to Michigan State is going to be a bit of a black mark on it.
Okay, it's going to be good. Stay tuned to the Detroit Sports Podcast as we bring you the great audio content and coverage of the Lions and Michigan State, unabridged, no spin, everything that happens we want to break down in a realistic way, and I think that's why you guys find us and tune in every week. Adam brings the noise. We are all doing the best we can to bring you all the action that we see out there in the trenches with the Lions, with Michigan and Michigan State. It's a fun time, and boy, cuz can you imagine how quickly the Tigers became irrelevant? Like, you see photos of the games that are attended, like 300 people are there. Like, people don't care. People are just like, okay, whatever. Let's get to the next thing. When the new GM gets here, we'll start talking about the Tigers. They got irrelevant quickly, just as soon as the stench of football came around. And it's really unfortunate. I hate it because I love watching baseball. I'll be honest, haven't watched a single pitch, maybe 3 weeks. Nothing in August as of training camp, and I'm a diehard. So you understand Riley Green's doing well, and that's about it. So it's real interesting how quickly the Detroit Tigers faded to the background. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Guys, I'm so grateful because of all the support that you've given Detroit Sports Podcast, all the noise. Adam, I'll break it to you. I put it in order for 24 hats, so a couple will come your way. One new color. They didn't have green. They didn't have a couple colors that were out of stock, but I'll throw you a couple khakis, maybe one of each color that I got. 24 new hats, going to give some away to people just out of the kindness of my heart, just because of the fact we built relationships, want more people to see our stuff. I love seeing Instagram photos of you wearing the Detroit Sports Podcast hat. And so slowly but steadily, we'll just keep getting ourselves out there. And I know, and I'll share the story with you guys briefly with the last 2 minutes. I'm standing at Lions practice, right? And you're focused. It's a lull period. There are times, and I'll be honest, okay? When they do the special teams drills, I pay attention, but loosely. It's when more people talk. Because, guys, we all know, nobody gives a shit about special teams. In all my reports, there's very little special teams. If you care about who's kicking and the blocking and all that, go somewhere else and find it. So you sit, you kind of stand and you watch and you make sure nobody gets hurt, and you start to overhear conversations. And it was such a thrill. I wish you were there standing by me as a Lions reporter and another beat writer. We're just kind of talking about their podcast, and they're like, yeah, it's such a great medium. It's really great. And everybody's listening. And, I got my podcast as number 3 in the NFL among team reporters, and it's doing great. And what a great way. And the Lions are lucky to let me talk to these guys and have these deeper conversations. And it just felt good, on one hand to say, okay, yeah, we picked a medium to broadcast in that many people like, but it was funny in that it's like, it's 2022. If you're not doing a podcast by now, it's such a great outlet to have fun and talk to your boys, express yourself in any kind of way. So it just it made me feel good and validated that, hey, you pick a medium to try and get into the media, and it works out. And you guys are part of it. Thank you so much for messaging at Detroit Podcast, at Adam R. STROZ. 2 dudes that are just like you guys, bringing you great audio content, uncensored, unfiltered, dedicated to Detroit sports. Doc and Jock, going strong, cuz we are approaching 500 episodes and 10 years of this. It really hasn't felt like 10 years. I'll be honest. It has not felt like it. Every single Thursday we dial it up and let loose new podcast content, and I'm so thankful that new and people are taking it to even higher heights with video content and studios and trying to create their own mark. So to be at the forefront of it, to be one of the early ones to do it in Detroit, means a lot, and I get to do it every week with the guy, the best podcaster in town, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Cuz, let's do it again. Let's fire it up next week.